Hey guys, it's Matthew here with another episode of Swordscomic Secrets. We're starting with episode 11. This episode introduces Chris the Necromancer, and it was inspired by, at the time, a company had just come out to say that they were offering to save your brain in some sort of carbon cube. But basically, the advertising pitch was that it was 100% fatal, but your brain would be saved forever. So that inspired this comic. Basically, he's offering to give people immortality by putting their souls inside swords. But then the reveal is sort of that he's a huckster and he's keeping the dead bodies to sell on as servants to the next people. Episode 12 was the first time the series kind of got a bit more anime inspired. But basically, it's a green-haired guy versus a purple-haired Vegeta type guy, and they're doing big anime sword fights. It's pretty straightforward. The Blade Master shows up a couple more times. He was going to be a bit more of a substantial character in the long run, but for whatever reason, he got shelved a little bit later on. So this is the second time that Bread Knight has shown up in the series. There's a dwarf in this episode, which is just kind of a normal dwarf, which comes into play a bit later on when I discuss why I chose to make some fantasy races the way they are. But for now, it sort of sets the tone for Bread Knight's adventures, where he'll periodically come in and get a new piece of gear. Observant fans might notice this episode's not really about swords, it's about shields. But those are few and far between. So this episode is quite lore heavy. It introduces the two new gods, which are the fire god and the water god. There's a lot of confusion because the water god is green rather than blue. Everyone feels they should be more clearly color-coded like that. But, at the time it wasn't really planned too aggressively out. These gods didn't have names at this point in the series either. But we'll get to that later on, I think. Kargop's reintroduced. Xiphos is shown as a child. His horn on his hat is... both of them are full. He hasn't broken one of his horns yet, although that's never explained in the series. This episode is episode 15, and it's the second time we see the Travel Goblin. Like I was talking about in the last episode, his appearance gets softened quite a lot. I don't recall doing this on purpose. I think it just sort of naturally happened that way. In this episode, originally, the medical symbol on the sword was in red, but it actually violates the Geneva Convention to show a red medical symbol in a game or comic. So I fixed it, and now I shouldn't get in too much trouble, except when I go around admitting that I used to have it red. This is the second time the Edge, the Merblade, shows up. I hadn't coined the term Merblade until now. It was very spur of the moment. It's something that people have expressed concern about for the last 5 years, because mer means water or fish, I suppose, and so it's inaccurate to call something a merblade because the mer is the wrong part of the word to keep. But regardless, it's just supposed to be a funny little joke, and again, jokes always win, so Merblade's stuck. This is the second time we see Stabbins. It also ties into Joy's storyline with the Demon King. He's got the board sword stuck in him here. You'll notice he's got a six-eyed Kargob throne. That is not because he made it. He just inherited this place, which is something that I've never really gone into in the series. But basically, this evil castle of his is a hand-me-down. I've got a sort of storyline in mind for that, but it would be complicated to go back and touch on it now. This is the first time we see the Swornament in action. which sort of sets up what happens next quite a bit. This wasn't really designed to be that tournament because that wasn't written yet. So this could have easily been a standalone event. And then sort of the story got built around it, I guess. You can see in the background this Stroller and Stabbins and Chris the Necromancer and the Bread Knight, so that places them all at the tournament, which get locked in much later. This episode is very much a sort of Samurai Jack type character, Odachi, meeting Chad the Bastard Sword, who changes visuals quite a lot. He gets very cutified over time as well. They are meeting in the Burnt Forest, which is the forest that got burned down in episode 2 of the series. And then the kingdom was built around that, so they're quite close to the kingdom that they're both heading to enter this tournament. Not that any of that's happened yet. I think this is one of the few times in the series where I color text. This might be the first time, I'm not sure. But, sometimes I do color the text to try and help readers differentiate ideas. I think it helps. But it's not something I always remember to do throughout the series. And this is episode 20, which was at the time sort of a critique of all of the critique that I had already received in the first 20 episodes. It's quite funny now, being at sort of 725 episodes, that people all the way back at episode 20 were telling me I was out of ideas and the idea had run its course and there's no way I could make any more Swords comics. It's sort of like think of the biggest number you can and then add one. It's just, I'm always going to have things I can do. But at the same time, it's sort of a self-burn because it's about a blacksmith who is just kind of churning swords out at a breakneck pace while other characters are telling him to slow down and, focus on quality. It wasn't until about episode 40 that I actually stopped making these comics daily, but the sentiment was here at the time that people were just, they were coming out faster than people felt they could read them and keep up. So, and I guess this is the point as well where I've placed Harp in the storyline. Again, she was in episode, I want to say 8, with her barbarian mother encouraging her to grow up to be a knight. So this places her in a more grown-up role as a partner to Smith the blacksmith, who also showed up in an earlier episode as a future person with a son. So this episode quite aggressively sort of starts putting the pieces together for the rest of the story. Originally, Harp was going to meet Edge the Merblade, and they were going to be friends, and she was going to be kind of the big Brienne of Tarth, kind of hulking warrior woman, carrying around a sentient swordman. But for whatever reason, that episode never got finished. I'd sketched it out a few times in a few different ways. But then once this episode came out and I paired her with Edge's dad, the whole story sort of changed. So really, episode 20 is when, I guess, all of the story elements really started to get planned out, whereas before that I was just kind of riffing for a long time. So yeah, that's the end of this episode. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Thank you.